Hi, good afternoon. I haven't been out of the room for a while, but I hear it's raining, so I'm glad you're here. I want to welcome you to the National Museum of the American Indian. Thank you for coming to our Living Earth 2023, which is Native Nations Confronting Climate Change as our theme, and also Happy Earth Day. Right now, I'd like to introduce to you Kaben Smallwood. He's Choctaw. Mr. Smallwood was selected to serve, if I get this wrong, you can fix it, okay? The U.S. Department of Agriculture Inaugural Secretary's Advisory Committee for Urban Agriculture. He is the CEO of Symbiotic Aquaponics, and he knows a lot more about water than I do. So I'm going to welcome him and join me in saying hello to Kaben Smallwood. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I'd also like to thank everyone here in attendance, everyone online in attendance, and thank you to those that came before me that enabled me the chance to be here. So today we're going to talk about water. How fitting in a presentation called Water that it's taking place during the middle of a monsoon outside. I feel that's our ancestors smiling down on us and giving us that resource when we need it. So today I want to start out by telling you a little bit about myself, and then I'll go into some Choctaw oral history, and then we'll talk some indigenous agricultural practices and how that has all shaped the person that I am now and the position that I'm in now. So first and foremost, my name is Kaben Smallwood, and I am very fortunate as I was selected by Secretary Vilsack to sit on the Urban Ag and Innovative Production Federal Advisory Committee. Through that position, we report directly back to Secretary Vilsack on ways to improve urban ag and innovative production. I'm of a mind that innovative production is the key to urban ag, and today I'll be able to talk to you a little bit about how these techniques can be utilized both in an urban environment, but also on a reservation or in areas that may be more resource deprived. So when I found out about this speaking event, I went to do a little research, and my research wanted to focus on water, shockingly. So I looked back through some Choctaw lore, and I found a story that really struck a nerve and that stuck with me. So I want to share that story with you all now. Back after creation, the water that the Choctaw people had was not capable of being utilized for agriculture. The story goes that water was actually poisonous water. So I was interested how we as a tribe went from poison water to being an agricultural based tribe as opposed to hunter or gatherers. And I found this story. And the story told me that insects, plants, and animals working together are the reason that we have clean water. The story goes that we had a pond that was full of poison. And the first thing that came to our rescue was the plant. The plant dipped its roots into the poison water and sucked out that poison. And those plants became poison oak, poison ivy, and poison sumac. After that, the wasp came, and the wasp consumed poison from the water and took that poison back into the environment. Next, the snake came and drank the poison from the water. And after, the water was clean, and we were able to use it for agriculture. So the moral of the story is these animals that exist in our world that are poisonous, that we should not fear them, that we should respect them, because without those animals, without those plants, we wouldn't have clean water today. So, since we're talking about water, I think it's very important for us to, number one, hold a mirror up and look back towards ourselves. Because the first step in water conservation is personal changes. And without knowledge, it's tough to make those decisions. So what I want to share with you is a couple of EPA statistics about home water usage. Okay? An average American family of 4 consumes about 400 gallons of water a day. This is a pretty staggering figure, especially compared to other countries and especially compared to areas on reservations where water is not plentiful. So in order for us to first understand how we can better serve water, I think we have to look introspectively to begin with. 70% of all of our water is used indoors. Bathrooms are the single largest consumer. Every time you flush a toilet, anywhere from 3.5 to 7 gallons of water goes away with each flush. And additionally, my favorite, a leaky toilet, the sound that you may hear in your bathroom, the sound, can be responsible for wasting up to 200 gallons of water a day. Okay? And when we waste this water, it's not just the water that we're wasting, it's the energy that it took to get the water to that location. It's the purification processes that took to get that water to be potable water. And it's the opportunity cost. It's what that water could have been better used for within our own environments and with our own communities. So at the end of the day, do the small things. I encourage you to brush your teeth with the water off. I encourage you to be cognizant of bathroom water usage. And I encourage you to be a steward of those resources and to protect them the best that you can, because at the end of the day, one person makes a little change, but all of us make major change. Next, the single biggest user of water is agriculture. And the agricultural sector accounts for about 70% of fresh water withdrawals globally. And in more developed areas, that number increases to 90%. So if we're looking from a macro level, the number one area that we can address water conservation is within our agricultural systems. I say water conservation with a question mark. I'm from the state of Oklahoma, now the Choctaw Reservation, and the state of Oklahoma was the impetus behind the start of the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl happened about 100 years ago and really wreaked havoc on most of Oklahoma, as well as a lot of the land in Oklahoma that was used for agricultural practices. And the reason is that we were doing the same things over and over and over again, but in the wrong way. Okay? We broke the ground up, we removed any native grasses or native trees, and that allowed for soil erosion. Drought combined with erosion led to dust storms that some people deemed as evil because they were so bad. Okay? My grandfather used to tell me stories about the Dust Bowl. And it made me think about a concept that was introduced to me by an Osage elder. And that concept was called the 7 generations. And the 7 generations concept, if you look it up, you'll see one of 2 different definitions. The first definition has to do with us making decisions that will benefit 7 generations down the road. Okay? But the definition that I prefer is that we ourselves are actually in the middle of the 7 generations. And it's our job and our responsibility to take the lessons that were taught to us by our elders, by our great-great-grandparents, and then to apply those lessons for the benefit of our great-great-grandchildren, ensuring that that knowledge gap stays intact and that those traditional ways are passed on. So I'm curious, have we forgot about the agricultural practices that led to the Dust Bowl? My answer would be yes, because less than 2 weeks ago in Oklahoma, there was a massive dust storm in El Reno. And some of these soil conditions and the amount of water that's available now are actually indicative of another Dust Bowl beginning. So I feel that we, as the indigenous population, as those that understand how to conserve water, it is not only our responsibility to share these techniques, but it's also our responsibility to implement these techniques. So what my company does is we build aquaponic systems, okay? And at the most basic level, what an aquaponic system is, it's a recirculating water system where we raise fish and produce. I would encourage every one of you to go out into the auditorium area or the atrium where the other speakers have booths set up, because one of them in particular is talking about chinampas. And chinampas were an Aztec form of agriculture in which the Aztecs would develop a floating structure out of reeds and grasses, fill it with soil, and then push it out onto Lake Tenochtitlan. And I'm sure I didn't pronounce that appropriately, but I tried my best. Okay? And the idea was that the plants shaded the water for the fish, but also took any excess nitrogen out of the water that would eventually become poisonous for the fish, and use that nitrogen to grow culturally significant plants and crops. Okay? This slide here is of a coworker of mine, and we went into Tulsa, Oklahoma to the Tulsa Legacy Charter School, and we actually recreated the chinampas as a means of showing this technology to the next generation of learners. Okay? This technology is very important at its most basic level, because what it allows us to do is to control our nitrogen cycles, which are really the key to aquaponics. So you might ask yourself that, this technology is wonderful, it's indigenous, and it makes sense, but how could this affect us today? These pictures here are taken from actually a golf course in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And if you look at your water resources around you, what you will probably find is some of this stuff occurring. Okay, this is blue-green algae that forms when there's excess nitrogen, a water source, and sunlight. The reason why this algae is here and is present is because of our agricultural runoff from our current agricultural systems. Whether that's the wastewater from a concentrated animal factory washing out into the rest of the environment, or whether that's the synthetic artificial fertilizers that we apply to our yards in order to make them more green. Eventually, what happens when it rains is it gets distributed to areas that it never intended on getting distributed and finds its way into our water sources. So here, this runoff is creating toxic water that's toxic both to plants, animals, and to us. So what's the cure? Well, looking back at our Choctaw oral history, it's introducing plants. So that's where aquaponics comes in. And aquaponics is a form of non-traditional agriculture in which we utilize and build recirculating water systems to raise both fish and produce. Okay? The benefit to this is we're able to do everything in a controlled environment, and by focusing on our water quality parameters, we can create an environment that is a wonderful environment for both fish to live and for plants to grow. Okay? Aquaponics is technically a combination of two other styles of agriculture, one being hydroponics and the other being aquaculture. Hydroponics is a generic term for germinating a seed and growing a plant in water. Okay? Hydroponics is a great technology in the fact that it enables a farmer to grow year-round in a controlled environment. Compared to traditional agriculture, it conserves water, And additionally, due to the ability to control your macro and micronutrients, you're able to grow certain crops faster than what you would be in a traditional farming environment. The downside is it's not sustainable. Sustainable is a buzzword that gets thrown around pretty regularly. So I'll share my definition of sustainability as I feel it fits within that concept of the 7 generations. My definition of sustainability is providing for today while leaving for tomorrow. Providing for today while leaving for tomorrow. And that's the big issue that I have with hydroponics, is hydroponics uses synthetic petroleum-based fertilizers in order to provide the nutrients that the plants need to grow. Okay? Eventually, hydroponic water becomes toxic because of the excess nutrients in the water. You'll hear people say they can dilute that water and then put it back onto soil or other types of gardens, but to me, that's using more water, right? Because the solution to pollution is not dilution. The solution to pollution is prevention. Additionally, when it comes to hydroponics, the biggest complaint that people have in the marketplace is about the taste of hydroponic vegetables. Oftentimes, people will say they're flavorless and they lack color. I'm a firm believer in you get out of your food what you put into your food. If you put synthetic fertilizers into food, you will get a synthetic taste out of the food. One thing I can say that I'm most proud of about our aquaponic systems is that I've got compliments many times that these tomatoes taste like the ones my grandmother used to grow. Right? And much better than those that you can get in a grocery store. And in fact, we've tested this ourselves. We went to the grocery store, we bought a tomato, we harvested a tomato from the aquaponic system, and we measured the Brix levels, which is a very easy measurement that any teachers could incorporate into their STEM curriculum. It's essentially measuring the sweetness or the amount of sugar that is in a crop. And oftentimes it's used for wine production. But those same fructoses, those same sweeteners exist in all of our foods. And that's what provides taste. And that taste can be measured through that sweetness. So the aquaponic tomatoes consistently had a Brix level 2 to 3 times that of what we were buying in the store, okay, which gives you a much more marketable product. Okay. Aquaculture is simply raising an aquatic species for human consumption. Okay. Good things about aquaculture. Number one is that it provides a protein source. Okay. The third bullet point says a better feed conversion rate when compared to other species. By way of example, a cow, in order to get 1 pound of edible protein from a cow, it requires a minimum of 12 pounds of input. So that feed conversion rate is 12 pounds in to 1 pound out. A fish, on the other hand, is about 1.2 to 1, meaning you feed a fish 1.2 pounds of feed in order to put on a 1 pound fillet. It's about 10 times more efficient when it comes to a feed conversion rate when compared to a cow. So I was given this presentation one time at Langston University, and an aquaculture professor stood up in the back of the room and said, "Well, you're right, Smallwood, but why?" And I sat there with a blank look on my face without being able to provide an answer. But he so graciously told me, "Fish don't stand up." The simplicity and the beauty of that statement has stuck with me ever since then. If you think about what it takes for a cow to forage and get 12 pounds of input. It's having to carry a large body over a large area that sometimes is not a hospitable area to begin with, using more and more energy to consume more and more energy. Okay? So fish give us as close to a perfect feed conversion rate as possible. Okay? Also, aquaculture provides a great alternative to the overfishing of our oceans. I won't sit here and throw statistics at you, but what I will tell you is a very small number of the fish that actually get caught in the nets in the ocean find their way to our plate, and everything else is collateral damage. That overfishing is causing massive issues with our oceans, and our oceans are interconnected and tied directly to every other part of our life. So by taking too much from the oceans, we are throwing off those ecosystems, and we're creating areas that, in essence, will be completely depleted of fish. Also, in the oceans, we see huge issues with microplastics, and in a controlled environment, you're able to raise a fish species free from introduction to any of those environmental problems. Okay? The downside, I don't know if anybody remembers the show Dirty Jobs by Mike Rowe. Okay? Aquaculture can be a very dirty job, mainly because the same reasons that are associated with any type of animal production. When you move a lot of one species into a given area, that one species is going to produce a lot of waste. Okay? And dealing with that waste stream is a huge issue for the sustainability for aquaculture farms. We're actually working with a few aquaculture farms internationally on helping them better use those waste streams to grow crops, to bring those plants back to address that toxic water. Okay? And if done incorrectly, aquaculture can sometimes introduce non-native species back into the environment. So people always ask, what fish species do you use? Well, we've done tilapia, catfish, koi, striped bass, minnows, and perch. Okay? But I would recommend you find a freshwater species that's native to your area. That way you run no risk of causing environmental damage. Okay? So aquaponics takes the best of both worlds and puts them together into a unified system that pays homage to the way things were done before. What was the biggest issue with hydroponic tomatoes from a consumer standpoint? Taste, because of the artificial fertilizer. What was one of the largest issues from aquaculture? Generation of excess waste. So by putting those two technologies together, we're able to take the best of both worlds, but leave the worst. Okay? With aquaponics, a farmer can harvest a protein source and a vegetable source simultaneously. Additionally, aquaponics allows farmers to plant crops twice as close together when compared to traditional agriculture. The reason is pretty simple. When we plant something in soil or when we plant something in a traditional method, that plant, just like you or I, is alive, it's living, it's breathing, and most importantly, it's competing for resources. So what you find when you plant crops into soil is that root structures grow and spread out to search for nutrients and water. In an aquaponic system, plants are constantly being inundated with nutrient-rich water. Therefore, root structures grow straight down. When root structures grow straight down, you're able to plant plants closer together because you're providing all the nutrients and water that those plants need. So rather than them competing, they exist. And when they exist, they can exist together. When they can exist together, we can grow more. So not only will you have a protein source, but you're also able, in the same amount of space, to grow more crops. Aquaponics is responsible. It is a completely self-sustaining system, or can be. You can actually train your fish to eat the leftover leaf remnants of the unedible portions of your plants. The systems that we're building now are pretty high-tech and they're pretty advanced, and our goal is to build systems that are zero water and zero nutrient waste. We want to maintain the water through a recirculating system in order to protect our water. And additionally, we want to keep those nutrients locked in that system, because those nutrients are what are going to encourage us to have a bountiful harvest. Okay? So aquaponics respects natural resources and minimizes the effect on the environment. Aquaponics provides for today and leaves for tomorrow. The data shows that aquaponics uses about 1/10 to 1/100th of the water compared to traditional agriculture. Granted, this size is a pretty good scale, and that's mainly due to the different definitions of traditional agriculture. Okay, so depending on what type of agricultural practice you're talking about, you'll see that aquaponics can be much more water saving from one compared to the other. For example, rice farming, it's a very water intensive process. So when we're looking at what it would cost in terms of water usage to cultivate rice in an aquaponic system compared to the way that we're cultivating it now, you're creeping more towards that 1 out of 10 figure, right, where we're using a very minimum amount. So how does it work? Okay. When you're farming aquaponically, you're not farming fish and you're not farming plants. What you're farming is beneficial bacteria, because bacteria is what is responsible for converting the fish waste from ammonia first into nitrites and then into nitrates. And nitrates are a nitrogen fertilizer. So without the bacteria, aquaculture on its own eventually can lead to toxic water through excess ammonia production. When you incorporate in the bacteria, that ammonia is converted by first nitrosomonas bacteria, which changes the chemical composition from ammonia to nitrites, and then nitrobacter and nitrosporiva come and convert the nitrites from the system into the nitrates. And that cycle continues over and over and over. The only inputs to our aquaponic system are fish feed and electricity. So, where did it all begin? Okay, it started at Kiowa Public Schools, which is a small school system in southeast Oklahoma. Oklahoma is not Missouri, that's for sure, but one thing about it is people want to be showed. Missouri is the show me state. So we knew in order to get our tribe, to get our communities, and to get others to adopt this technology, there was only one way to do it, and that was to show them. So my brother and I, we went into an asset building program with our tribe, the Choctaw Nation. We saved $2,000. The tribe matched it with $4,000, and we spent every dollar that we had building this proof of concept. This proof of concept was really the beginning of the entire company, and it enabled us to grow rather quickly due to the fact that our work here led us to a grant with the Hitachi Foundation for social entrepreneurship, for companies that were focusing on being stewards of the environment, of their finances, and then also of their community. Okay. So that award really enabled us to take the next step in creating specific components for aquaponic systems Whereas here we were using things that were repurposed from Lowe's or Tractor Supply. Okay? But when we first started, the prevailing literature said you cannot grow tomatoes in aquaponics. The first crop that we planted, tomatoes. And as you see there, it's an absolutely beautiful cherry tomato plant. Okay. Additionally, red salad bowl lettuce is required to be in the salad bar that the schools offer. So we decided we would begin to grow red salad bowl lettuce. Additionally, as this concept picked up, my cousin, who was a student at this school, grew herbs and wanted to create a product for an FFA competition. She went to the kitchen, found an old bread warmer that was no longer being used. She harvested the fresh herbs, dried them out in the bread warmer, created her own brand, and then distributed dried herbs into the community. A very powerful moment to see her, right? That wasn't us. We had nothing to do with it. The entire thing was from us giving her a tool that she can use. So we see that as our role, as we provide the tools for the industry. We provide the tools for people to better manage those resources. We provide the tools to enable people to have more control over their food supply, but do it in a manner that respects our ancestors and respects the earth. Okay. Since this proof of concept, we've built over 200 systems in 14 different states, and it's growing by the day. We form partnerships with research institutions from Oklahoma State University to Texas A&M to the University of Purdue to the University of Arizona. And the goal is to allow these researchers to now take this technology and push it to its limits to figure out really what we can grow. The goal eventually is to take that data that's derived from these universities to come back into urban areas or to come back into areas that are resource strapped and be able to build customized aquaponic systems that can feed people in urban populations. The number one thing that I want to highlight about urban ag and innovative production is that urban ag does not happen without innovative production. Our cities right now are already pushed to the brink when it comes to our water resources. Every new person that moves into a metropolitan area adds an additional level of strain onto those water supplies. Now, we're discussing moving agriculture, which, if you'll remember from the slide earlier, is the single biggest user of water, into areas that are already strapped for water resources. In order for this to be done successfully, we are going to have to rely on recirculating systems. We're going to have to rely on rain capture. We're going to have to rely on people being more innovative and doing more with less. Okay. Here's a few of the tribes that we've worked with: the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma, the Modoc Nation of Oklahoma, the Muskogee Nation of Oklahoma, the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma, Blue Lake Rancheria out in California, and the Prairie Island Indian Community in Minnesota. And the cool thing about all of these opportunities is that all the tribes use them differently. Right? So we introduced the tool for the tribe, and now the tribe has taken ownership over food production, over plant production, over STEM education, and are now utilizing these tools as a means of passing on information to those future generations. So we feel that's our role in the middle of those 7 generations. Okay? I want to leave you with a quote. It's more than just food. What I've learned doing food research is you can't produce food by yourself. You need people, you need family, you need community and relationships. So a lot of it is about rebuilding community and reconnecting with the land. And I think that is a very important healing process for our people. This quote, it speaks to me because it's true. At the end of the day, it's not about what one person does. It's not about what my company does. It's about what we all do collectively. And as Indigenous people, we are the folks who, through our birthright, are meant to take care of the land. We are the folks that, through our birthright, are supposed to show how to grow food in a better way. And we've lost that. So it's important, whether it's digging in the dirt, whether it's building an aquaponic system, it's important for our communities to get back to food. Because at the end of the day, that food is not only healing for our body, but also for our spirit. So that being said, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. And I think we may have a small question and answer session coming up if you all have any questions. So thank you very much.
Do we have anyone that has questions today, or is it time to not have questions? I think we have no questions. Okay, so thank you for coming today. And, whoa, sorry. Here.
This one right here? Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, so on that picture, that's just a picture of what I call the grow beds. Okay, so on this model right here, that would be the area on top. Okay, the fish tanks are separated. They're still within the greenhouse area, but the picture's focus was just on the plants that are grown. So essentially, we have a separated system, just like you would see here on this aquaculture slide, where we have independent fish tanks, but rather than the fish tanks being on their own, we're taking that nutrient-rich water and then pumping it a variety of different ways into our grow beds where we grow the plants. So at schools, oftentimes, we'll use goldfish. Okay, goldfish are a great fish species because, believe it or not, they're hardy. Okay, they have a one-way digestive tract, so as soon as you put it in, it's coming out, and also kids like them. So it encourages interaction with the fish. Additionally, when you're using a goldfish, you delay the end game for the fish. If you have an edible fish species like a tilapia or a catfish, you're going to want to crop it out, which requires fish processing. Okay? Using a goldfish does cut down on the protein side of the equation, but some people don't like to kill fish, so it gives them an opportunity to still do aquaponics and still utilize that cycle without having to worry about the crop out. Another fish species that I think would be wonderful in my state is minnows, because there's a massive market for fishermen. And again, you're not the individual that's having to do away with the fish. So different strokes for different folks. That really depends on your level of ability or want to process fish. Question here? Microphone? Oh, yeah, great. Yeah, so there's a microphone up there if anybody wants to head to the microphone. Yeah, so great question. So the aquaponic systems that we build, we've done a lot of research over them, so I can tell you pretty specifically, they use about 0.2 gallons of water per square foot of grow space a day. Okay, so for a frame of reference, A 50 grow bed aquaponic system gives you about 1,000 square foot to actual grow in. A greenhouse that would house that system is about a 30 by 96 foot greenhouse. And we're able to run that entire system for 4 days off of what the average American family of 4 uses in one, to give you some idea. Additionally, we're now building systems in indoor environments. And in indoor environments, we're even able to lessen that water usage even more, because as the plants transpire and release water into the environment, we're able to capture that water with our air handlers and off of our condensers, and then reintroduce that water back into the system. What that means in essence is the only time we're losing water is through the physiological processes of the plant, or when the plant actually consumes it. And when the plant consumes it, we're not losing water at all. Right? That's the purpose of that water. So great question. But in an indoor environment, I think that number will be even lower. Yeah, so even with drip irrigation, the problem isn't that it's not that they're using a ton of water compared to other styles of agriculture. It's that even the water that they're using, they're not able to reclaim and to recapture. So that water has to go back through the full natural process again. Okay, it has to rain, has to get collected, has to get pumped back up. Okay, so there's a concept called the water energy nexus, which is how much energy it takes to get water to our locations. So it's not the fact that they're using a lot of water, it's that it's requiring a lot of energy to get the water that they do use, okay? And anytime that you put water onto soil, okay, it's not gonna be near as efficient of a process, even with spot irrigation, just because the natural losses in the water cycle and through traditional agriculture. So if you are gonna garden in soil, yeah, minimize water usages the best you can through techniques, drip irrigation. Some of the other individuals out at the booth, things like the Zuni waffle gardens, right? So they just implemented a design that enabled them to catch more water. Okay? All those practices are wonderful practices when you rely strictly upon the rain. But anytime you start tying into any other water source, you've got that energy concern. So, good question as well. Yeah? Okay. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming, and we will have more talks yet to come today. So, and that includes Zuni Waffle Garden. So you want to check the schedule and see when that is. The next one which about Sea Garden starts in about 15 minutes. So thank you for coming today.